Welcome everyone to our webinar today on fraud and financial crimes. I'm Kim Miner and I lead our Financial Services Global Marketing Program. For our webinar series today, you'll see on the screen that there are actually 3 different webinars that we'll be holding over the course of the next couple of weeks. Today, certainly, as I said, we'll focus on preventing fraud and financial crimes, but I also hope that you'll join us for our other 2 as well. Let me also say that all of these are being recorded, so I welcome you to listen in on replay or share the replay with your colleagues. So go ahead and register, even if you perhaps can't attend live, and we'd love to have your feedback and collaborate with you as we tackle these 3 particular issues within financial services. Today, we do have a full agenda for you. I'm going to start us out, and we'll have 3 very deep technical and industry experts with us. Brent Bateman from TABLOID will be talking about insurance claims fraud, and we are thrilled to have one of our key business partners, User Ready, with us today. And we'll have Anirban and Ankush with us talking about anti-money laundering and credit card fraud. They will partner at delivering those 2 demos. Let me say that User Ready has been a great partner with TABLOID as we build out financial services solutions. We find our ecosystem of partners to be very valuable. So thank you, User Ready, today for participating. I do want to make a statement here. Visa was going to jump on. I got an email this morning. He is actually on a flight on a very unplanned trip out of the office. So he apologizes, but let me say that for TC this year, I hope most of you are going to TABLOID conference. This session on fraud and financial crimes is what Visa is going to be presenting. So you'll find them in the app that went live today, or actually yesterday. And in the app, you'll be able to go in and start favoriting some of your sessions. So I do encourage you to hear the Visa story while at TC. We will also be recording that session at TC and can make it available after as well. So we do have material here that we will be presenting, but Mark had hoped to plug his session for TC, but he is actually on a flight as we speak. I do encourage you, though, if you haven't taken a look at some of the financial services sessions out there, you can actually now search for under a track called Financial Services. So we hope to see most of you in Las Vegas next month, and most of you in these sessions hearing these great leaders in our industry speak. I think that most of you certainly understand TABLOID, but for the few of you who don't, let me just say that, you know, before we do dive into fraud and financial crimes, I just want to give you a background on what our history is and our vision and our mission. But ultimately, our history has driven us to where we are today, with us being a real platform of delivering analytics and insights to your organization. And what you'll see is that we certainly have a large footprint within the financial services industry. You know, almost all financial service enterprises have some type of TABLOID implementation for visual analytics, and you'll see us across banks, insurance, you'll see it's card processors, asset managers, capital market firms, you name it. We actually are well represented throughout our industries. As we work with, it looks like this is not projecting too well, but you can still read it. It looks as we work with all these customers in our industry on priorities, what we're actually seeing is that we really come up with 4 central themes here. And TABLOID is really allowing these organizations to innovate and get closer to the customer, ensure regulatory compliance, manage risks, and manage operational efficiencies. We all hear the term cost takeout, and you know, how do you take out costs without impacting customer service? When it comes to regulatory compliance, certainly we know that these regulations keep coming at us, right? So how to keep pace with those regulations, ensure compliance with those regulations so that we aren't then at risk for noncompliance. And then today we are going to focus then on proactively managing risks. And today specifically within managing risks, we're going to look at fraud and financial crimes. So a lot of organizations have already been doing something in this space, so it's not really new. Why act now? I think what's really key here is that the fraudsters, the crime networks, they keep getting much more sophisticated. They're much more agile. And in the TC session that Visa will be presenting, they're going to bring their head of risk with them to talk about some of those latest trends. So not to keep plugging the session, but I think it's always great to hear from a chief risk officer to what really is top of mind to them. But clearly the sophistication is out there. I mean, my goodness, for those of you in the U.S. Or use the Experian system for credit, the fact that they were hacked is a huge concern. So then how do all of us in financial services react to that to make sure that we're on top of these sophisticated crime networks that are trying to take advantage of all of us perhaps having our guard down? And then, of course, we all know that crime happens within our four walls as well. So how do we stay on top of internal financial crimes and, be on top of different activities that just aren't appropriate and do present a lot of risk to our organizations? And I think that one of the key drivers here is everything is trying to be faster, right? We all want better customer service. We want faster claim settlement. We want faster payments processing. But it's how do you actually balance that drive by the customer for that speed with the right analytical tools that can work at the speed of those transactions? And I think that's where Tableau comes into play pretty significantly, is to give you that ability to be on top of it so that you can identify it, respond to that fraud, and then prevent the risk from entering and having to then be mitigated after either a payment's been made or something like that. So certainly, there are a lot of external factors that are driving the emphasis in this space. And let me point out in the bottom right-hand corner here, the fact that E&Y, there are multiple studies out there. There just happens to be the one I picked up. But it talked about while folks are doing things, they really haven't put a formalized process in place, and they are finding value in this report at talking about data-driven indicators to really identify fraud and internal occurrences and so forth, to really be on top of your game here. Let me throw up just a couple of examples before we turn it over to the demos. This is a public example for us, and this is Ernst & Young, and it is out of the APAC area, so it is an Asia-Pacific example of how E&Y, as one of our strategic integrators, is using Tableau in a lot of its professional services opportunities. No different than UserReady is using it today in their professional service engagements with organizations throughout financial services. But what E&Y did is they used it both for banks and for insurance companies at identifying high growth areas where they might have patterns of fraud within their trading practices, and they used this as an early indicator to catch the fraud before it went big. So what I've included here is just a sample dashboard, and you can get the full story on Tableau.com, but this is just one of their sample dashboards where they're looking at what, in this case, is an agency. It could be a branch, whatever the case may be, what the key metrics are within their operation, and looking for those outliers. They did identify about 5 outliers in these types of analyses, particularly with this customer, and were able to take action to eliminate that risk. Some of that meant, removing some folks from employment, but it really pointed out the fact that it really was identifying what those data points were that were outliers. The other example we have in the insurance space is Allstate, and in fact, Marta's going to be back with us at TC this year, and updating their success story at using Tableau within their claims operation. But they were facing a big situation of a lot of fraudulent claims, staying on top of those, particularly when they had a lot of storm damage in New York and Florida. So for those listening in the U.S., clearly storms are a significant concern, with Hurricane Harvey and Irma having hit Houston and in Florida. And because of that, we all know that we have to be on guard with respect to fraudulent claim activities. They were able to use geospatial capabilities and gain really not just insight into potential fraud, but then they saw increased value across their operation within their whole claims management system. So it's a really great story of how you take it in, land with a particular use case in mind, and be able to then expand it and go broader with the use of Tableau. So for today, we are going to jump into some demos. And the three use cases that we will particularly be showing today are claims fraud, AML, and credit card fraud. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brent. Brent, would you like to take control?
I would. Thank you. Hey, good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Great. My name is Brent Bateman. I'm a customer consultant with Tableau and the financial services team. In the next 20 minutes, I want to help you understand how Tableau can help you tackle fraud. So this slide is a pretty good indicator that fraud is widespread and it's expensive. It's not isolated to just one part of the world, and generally when people estimate the cost of it, it's in the B range, the billions range. So we need an effective platform in fighting fraud, and it's a fluid activity like Kim said, so it needs to enable agility as well. So fortunately there's Tableau. It's a versatile, effective platform. It's a bold claim. It's easy for me to make that claim because I'm an employee of Tableau, but generally I like to validate my claims with objective customer stories. So what I did in preparation for this is I went to tableau.com and just searched for the keyword fraud. And usually when you search for a keyword, you get a couple of great customer stories. It just so happens to be the same customer that Kim found. It's a slightly different story, though. So in this case, it's not completely relevant to claims, but it is fraud in financial services. What they found was they were working with one of their banking clients, and they observed unusual trading activity over the course of several days. So what they did was they isolated that point, they dug in a little bit deeper, found that there were a lot of trades just by a couple of people, and that was really unusual. And then they coalesced that with a BlackBerry chat stream that they had. There was a totally different data source, and they found that those same people were talking amongst each other. So then they opened up those messages and found that insider trading was going on. Ultimately, they operationalized this dashboard and prevented what they deemed to be millions of dollars in fraud in the future. So this is just one example. There were 172 matches that I got when I searched for fraud. If you're interested in other fraud stories, please go to tableau.com and check out these other stories. So now let's pivot into just a general discussion on the landscape that we're currently in and why it benefits someone that uses Tableau in using data to fight fraud. So we're all very well aware of this probably, but we use our devices more than we ever have in the past, and we'll continue to do that in the future. They say that we look at our phones something like 150 times per day. Each time that we use our phone or we use a device or we click something on a screen or we execute a financial transaction, we leave behind a trail. And that trail just so happens to be composed of data. And because we're using our devices more and more and more, the volume of data is growing exponentially. In fact, our data is even creating its own data. So again, this behooves someone that uses a platform like Tableau to combat things like fraud. So in the context more of claims fraud, let's discuss that a little bit. So whether perpetrators of fraud know it or not, just like we do when they execute anything on a device or execute a financial transaction, it leaves behind a trail. That trail's composed of data. Now the challenge becomes for the good people that fight fraud, that data is in all these different systems, it's in all these different sizes. A lot of times the size of the data outpaces conventional BI platforms' ability to support that. So these people are really in a bind when it comes to answering their own questions. Without Tableau, what they're dependent on is this high priesthood of report developers with conventional BI to craft their reports for them. So if this lady over here says, well, I'm processing these claims, I see a bunch of lightning strikes in upstate New York in January, in these zip codes, it looks funny to me. Hey guys, can you create a report for me that outlines this and breaks it down by zip code? They can say, well, yeah, we can do that for you, but it's going to take some amount of time because we're overwhelmed with requests right now, and it takes some time to script MapReduce jobs to things like Hadoop, right? So ultimately, it might take them a few months to get that answer back to these people, and that doesn't help them. By the time that gets back to them, that problem is obsolete. So from a very small scale to a huge scale, like the entire organization, this approach with conventional BI has failed. So we're in this new realm where data is in many different sources, it's growing exponentially, and it will continue to do that in the future. So if you don't embrace the value of data and you don't have a platform that can handle these challenges, it's a legitimate threat to your business. On the other hand, if you have something like Tableau, it's an opportunity to gain competitive advantage on your competitors. And again, fortunately, Tableau's mission, like Kim said, it's to help people see and understand their data. So there's two key words I like to point out there whenever I show this. One is people, and that means non-technical users. Like, it will help technical people too, but it also enables non-technical people to answer their own questions. So with drag and drop interactions, that's something that everyone can do. They can see their data and get the answers to the questions that they have. And then data too. Tableau is committed not just today, but also in the future to helping people see their data. And as evidence of that, we had 37% of our revenue in GAAP standards in 2016 dedicated to research and development. So our platform continues to lay the foundation for the future, for the evolutions of data in the future, to be able to help people understand their data. And just one more slide on the value of Tableau, and then we'll pivot into the demo. Right? So, what does Tableau deliver to end users using data? So faster time to insight. If we looked at conventional BI with a crosstab, people have to consciously pick out data points and compare them to other data points to understand the context of the data. And if you think about that, if you visualize that data, it's much more easy to see which bar is bigger than the other bar, like which guy in this case landed more punches, right? We don't have to think about that. It's a pre-attentive attribute, and it's one of the reasons why Tableau is picked up so aggressively in organizations worldwide. So faster time to insight, faster interactions, it's opening up all this free time to give people the latitude to explore the unexplored. So people have time now to test hypotheses and chase hunches and disprove biases. And when you do that at scale, it unearths extreme value in the organization. At a minimum, what that means is, well, hey, you've got conventional data source that you always use to run your business. You have this other data source that you've always wanted to tap. What if you tap that and found a weird correlation behind something like weather patterns and claim submissions? If that correlation was strong enough, it might justify the use of that dashboard in your analysis in the future, and it might alter some business processes. So again, when you do that, you unearth extreme value, and this is a beautiful cycle that we see in Tableau regularly. When people execute this, they find that, and they ultimately find that, and it continues to circle back to the beginning, and people invest more and more time in learning the platform and using the platform. Okay? So the specific agenda for today, walk through a finished operational dashboard. This is a great case where a claims processor changed her role into a claims analyst once she observed some weird behavior in claims that were coming in. And two, we'll do analysis from scratch. I think that two is the most important part of this demo. Doing analysis from scratch means, well, hey, you've got a library of reports that answer a defined set of questions. Fraud is a fluid entity. So as perpetrators of fraud see you statically operationalize your oversight measures with dashboards or whatever, any oversight medium, if it's just stuck in the mud, they'll work around that to find new ways to do that. So if your people fighting fraud aren't agile to be able to answer new questions and test new hypotheses about how people are executing fraud, then they're also stuck in the mud. So Tableau is a great platform for helping regular people do analysis from scratch, or taking a finished dashboard and asking a question that no one had thought to ask yet. Right? So let's walk through our first scenario, and then I'll share my screen and jump into the finished dashboard. So we had a claims processor working with data on a very granular level. She looked at claims month over month, and sometimes if she was lucky, she would get 3 months worth of data. She started recognizing some stranger things with her data, right? So she goes to Tableau desktop training. She comes back and she demands from her boss that she gets a more historical context of those claims so that she can do a more thorough analysis. So she works through Tableau, she iterates, she explores, she comes out with this operational dashboard that the entire organization loves now, and I'll explain the success that she experienced at the end of the demo. So let me now share my screen, and I will show you what she found in her dashboard, in her ultimate dashboard. Kim, can you let me know when you can see my screen, please?
I see your screen.
Great. So this is a rendering of her dashboard. I anonymized her dashboard. Obviously, I changed some of the data, so some of the categories that I'm showing aren't necessarily categories she observed, but she thought that there was a weird thing with earthquakes in the east, right? So she looked at this dashboard and she said, earthquakes in the east, that's bizarre. So she clicked this button over here and the map updated and she said, well, it's New York. New York's got a lot of earthquake records, like claims coming in with damages from earthquakes. That's unusual. Like that's not on a fault line, right? So she clicked New York and she got the historical claims over time and saw that 2016 was way above average. So then she followed the prompts on the screen. She clicked the mark to view the detail, and it jumped her to the granular detail that explained those claims, right? So we went from very high level information down to granular information. And if she wanted to go all the way to the original claim, she could do that too. Let's see if I can come back to the dashboard here. All right. So that was a pretty neat example that we saw with this customer. Ultimately, she measured the outcome here, and these numbers are abstracted a little bit. But what she was able to do, even though the number of claims coming in for earthquakes in New York were increasing, she was able to break the correlation between hours that they spent on it and the cost of remediating those claims with her organization. So it was substantial cost savings over time. And how did they do that? They operationalized the dashboard and they put policies into place to have a subsequent prompt for, are you sure you want to enter this claim? There were no earthquakes reported in New York during the time when you suggest this claim happen, right? So again, pretty substantial savings. These understate the actual value of the savings that organization experienced, but by using an operational dashboard, you can check, like the data is dynamic here, and the dashboard, it just holds a structure, so as the data changes, the dashboard lives, right? This is a great example of a finished dashboard, okay? But invariably, someone's going to have a question that doesn't have an answer that's contained on this dashboard here. So we need to give them the platform to be able to answer their own questions very easily. Let's pivot now to a blank canvas, right? So here we have a totally blank canvas in Tableau. It's super easy to connect the data here. We've got all these different data sources right out of the box. In this case, our data happens to be just in Excel, right? And the experience of working through different tables in Excel is the exact same experience as if you were working through a database. So she wants to look at claims. If she needed to join together tables or different tables in the same database, she can just drag them out. She doesn't have to ping her IT team to say, hey, can you guys create a left outer join for me and link it on these three on these three fields? She can do all that stuff herself, and that's one of many time savers in Tableau. Let's jump right into the sheet now and start doing analysis. Let's start with some fun stuff. I always like to start with anything that has a globe next to it. So we'll look at states. Where are they getting claims coming in from? And let's look at claims paid, right? So I can take claims paid and just pull it over here. And I'm not releasing my mouse intentionally because I want to explain to you, this is Tableau's way of saying, I'm going to think for you and show you the best way to render this information with what's already on the screen. So in that case, it put the amount of claims paid onto the size here, the size of these bubbles, right? So it looks like California has the most claims paid. I can use the show me up top here as well. And I generally like to use a filled map rather than a symbol map, depending on the data that I'm looking at. This is great. She's comfortable with this at this point. She sees, well, yeah, it's California. What I would like to do at this point, though, is create a filter on region. All that you have to do in Tableau to create a filter, this is super easy compared to other BI tools, just right-click and left-click. And now when she updates this for anything, it updates the entire map, right? So things that often get overlooked when we do a demonstration of Tableau, I generally point out because I've worked with other tools in the past. So I'll just call this an easy map, and we'll proceed to our next set of analysis. So she's looking at this lens of her data here, and she sees a relationship between the data. So something like subcategory and category. She says, I can create a hierarchy from it. You know, how would I do that in Tableau? Well, it's a layup. You just drag and drop that, right? So now we've got this hierarchy that we can walk down and do analysis on. So let's say, all right, we want to look at the original claim amount, and we want to check it out by the category, the loss code. And maybe we want to pivot this too, right? So we got these tiers. We don't know what they are, so let's explode them. So we explode them when we walk down that hierarchy. So this hierarchy is one of many things that you can alter in the lens of your data. You can do things like calculations and then share this with your team so that everyone uses the same hierarchies, the same calculations, the same groups of customers, stuff like that. And this is really simple to do. Again, in conventional BI, it took that high priesthood of people to code the stuff. In Tableau, it's all drag and drop. All right, so we're looking at this information, and this is good. It tells us the original claim amount, but let's say that we've got a great allocation engine which can distill something like profit or net position, so we want to consider that too. So we'll take position here, pull that out, and we'll use the show me thing again, and show me is going to say, I'm going to show you the best way to render this information. So it's telling us that there's a lot of landslides in this data. She thinks that's kind of strange, right? We don't see that often. Let's see if that's a regional thing. So she takes region here and drags that out, right? Now it breaks it out by region. We've got something that we call a small multiple. We can isolate that landslides in the east are very high. Like, I'm sorry, they're not very high, but they're costing us money. Like our net position there is negative, and that's an issue. So invariably at this point, someone says, this is great, I love the visual analytics piece, but I want to see the underlying detail. Well, you can do that real easily in Tableau in a couple of different ways, one of which is just clicking that mark and saying, show me the underlying data. So there's that little icon there. So we could export that. Alternatively, we could transform anything, any visualization into a crosstab in Tableau, and we get what we're always used to. But I would advise against this, and at a minimum, what I would say is use one of the Tableau bells and whistles to augment this. So take something like color, for example, and leverage net position to have it really point out that landslides are an issue there. Right? We'll walk through one other little portion here, then we'll weave everything together, and I'll show you how you can share this securely with your team, and then I'll wrap it up and pass it to user ready. Okay? So for our next thing, we want to understand that this is isolated just to certain customers, like where we're losing money with certain customers or certain clients, right? So let's say we've got our net position, we want to understand our original claim amount, and Tableau is thinking for us and said, I just switched from a bar chart to a scatter plot there. Why? Because we've got two different measures there, two different things that we do math on. But right now it's not really scattered by anything. We want to scatter it up by customer name, right? So now we can see there's a bunch of customers down here where we're really losing a lot of money on. So maybe we want to highlight them and say, let's create like a little group for those people or something to denote that we're losing money on these people that we can reuse anywhere in our analysis at any point. So we'll create what we call a set from those, and we'll call these bad positions. Maybe we want to reevaluate the policies and how we price them. So now we say, all right, well, is this isolated to just a certain region? Unfortunately, we've already got a map here, so we can just take that set that we just created and drop it on filter and isolate that. Well, hey, you know, it's kind of spread out throughout the entire country. Yeah, there's no one in Montana or Wyoming, but maybe that's just because we don't have a lot of customers there. But at least we've disproved any concerns we've had about a regional bias, right? So let's come back over here. Let's give this a name. We'll call this scatter plot. We'll call this one breakdown by category. And now if we want to pull everything together in one dashboard, it's really simple. We just click the dashboard icon, and following in Tableau's conventions, we just drag and we drop. So I dragged in that first thing. Now we'll drag in that second thing. This is great. That filter still applies up top here. Maybe we want to make this filter apply to everything. So we can just select this caret up here and say, well, hey, I want this to apply everywhere now. So just keep the West in there, right? That's pretty cool. We can do the same thing with any entity of our dashboard here. And I love this part. This makes it like a video game for me. So if I just select a couple of these marks over here, then it just selects those same states down the portion below. And again, that's what kind of makes it fun for me. It made it fun for me when I first started here. All right, at this point, let's say that we're comfortable with this dashboard. We can just go ahead and say, publish this workbook. And it'll publish it to your server, which is the central secure hub to share content in Tableau. In fact, I think if I still have this open, I do have it open. Okay. I've got the original dashboard. I published this up to server. So what this means for me is if I want to share this with someone now, I can just do it in a couple ways. I can say share, grab the link here, put it in an email. I can create an alert based on this. I can do all kinds of things as far as even editing this. So if I didn't have desktop, which is the application you have on your PCs, and I just had the web client, I could alter this and do things like, well, hey, I want to create a calculation here. Let me do that. And you can do all that on the fly without having to maintain any software on your PC. So we covered a lot of ground in a short amount of time there. I just want to recap some key points. Yes, operational dashboards are great. They live. So as long as your data changes, the dashboards will change with it, and they'll point out outliers to you if you design them that way. And then two, more importantly, Tableau enables your non-technical people to answer their own questions of their data so that they can work faster. And then ultimately, we get back to the desired state where, if I can find my browser, where we walk through that cycle, right? Where we've got, I guess I have to stop sharing my screen, right? That cycle of finding faster insights because we're doing things more quickly. And then because of that, we have time to explore unexplored questions with our data. All right. And then as a consequence, right, we distill that really extreme data. When you give everyone the power to explore their own questions, their data, you're going to shake out millions of dollars in savings, especially in the domain of fraud. You're going to find some weird patterns you never thought to observe before. So with that said, I'll wrap it up here, and I'll pass it off to our friends at UserReady. But if there are any questions, I'm going to hang around at the end of this presentation and be around to answer them. So thank you for your time, and handing the ball over to the UserReady team.
Thanks, Brent. So this is Anirban Ghosh. I'm an BI Engagement Manager at UserReady. For the next duration of 20 minutes, I also have my Tableau Viz superstar from UserReady, Ankush. We will be running through a couple of use cases around money laundering and credit card fraud. While covering these two use cases, we're gonna share a few examples how it is done in our day-to-day world and how it impacts our life. And finally, we are going to see if we can leverage, if and how we can leverage BI analytics and get better control over the fraud and the financial crime piece and overall make the world a better place. So let's get started. To start with, let's see what's hitting the tabloids, what is making the news. Post 2012, this is the era when the regulators first saw what the impact these criminals are causing to the world. And this is the time that they started fine-tuning or getting a hold on things. So HSBC 2012, the overall impact was $7.40 billion. This is where the regulators found HSBC was not having adequate AML controls. And there came a scenario when HSBC was about to lose its US dollar license. Again, the same year, 2012, Standard Chartered was found to be helping the Iranian government regardless of all the AML regulations, and they were seen to be money laundering. And the overall impact was $254.74 billion. And Standard Chartered had to pay a fine of $656.11 million at the end. Next. In 2010, Wachovia, the impact was $388.49 billion. Here, it had a huge impact on the social life of people, wherein huge amount of money, the drug cartels would use the banks to put in all the illegitimate money, and then the money, all the black money would be converted to white. The problem here is they use this money to sell all the different kinds of drugs, which had a huge social impact, and it was a survey was shown and conducted where it was seen that the young generation was hugely affected there. Next, very recently, 2017, Habib Bank. It's Pakistan's largest private bank, which had to shut down its New York office after successful business for 40 years for repeatedly failing to watch for the compliance problems. So overall, the impact is huge, and these criminals are exploiting the disorganization, the diversity of data, and the difference in process of all the organizations. So let's see what can be done. Now the numbers came. Overall, from 2009 to 2016, we are seeing a rapid increase of 25% of the increase in money laundering data. In 2016, a survey was conducted by PwC, and the numbers. This is what the numbers say. The regulatory enforcement survey, it found that in 32% there was no major consequences in the enforcement lead. In 13% there were some consequences. In 5% there was a remediation program that these banks had to follow. In staggering 32%, there was no regulatory inspection conducted for whatever reason, and in 18%, no one knows what happened. If you see the overall impact from both the scenarios in money laundering and credit card fraud, it's 5.5% of the overall GDP of the world. In 2016, the impact stays at $2,024 billion. Let's look at the credit card fraud and see what's the impact it's causing. So as of 2015, out of every $100 spent using credit cards, the amount of fraud would be 6.97 cents. From a micro level, this looks minimum, but let's see as the huge numbers. The overall impact in 2015 for credit card fraud alone was $21.87 billion. And the loss that was borne by the credit card issuer was a staggering $15.72 billion, which is close to 70%. And then the merchants as well as the ATM acquirer had a certain amount of loss in that overall picture, which is $5.98 billion and $217 million. Next, going ahead, let's look at specifically into money laundering. So overall, on our left-hand side, the slide that we see is the number of AML-related sanctions in US base alone. In the year 2015, there were 72 sanctions. And on the right-hand side, we see number of illicit financial overflows coming in 2016. It is very interesting to notice that all the first world countries, most of the first world countries which is backed up by technology and good amount of money to work on the financial crime and financial tech sector, there is a huge impact there as well. For example, the European Union. This is the amount of fraud and financial AML money that was the impact that was seen, around $1,200 billion. So year over year, by 2019, this amount is going to grow to $1 to $2 trillion. So let's try and see what happens exactly in money laundering. There are three key stages. The first stage is placement, when all the wrongdoings, the wrong illegitimate funds are placed into the economy. In the second stage, it's called layering, where the money is invested and disinvested, and there's several layers created on the original source of income. And finally, in integration, wherein all this money is taken out and the black money is made white and taken out from the economy. There are various techniques that is followed, and we are going to look into a few examples going ahead in the next few slides. So let's look into a couple of the most famous examples. The first is where the underground banking, which is also known as Hawala, wherein a person A gives money to person B, and this might circulate within a country, or it can go across several countries. This is the problem here is there is no audit trail, and a significant amount of money is pushed in this scenario. The second scenario is shell company. This is where a company would take in the dirty money and they give the clean money would be paid out. Here, in exchange of this dirty money to clean money, the shell company would take certain percentage of the money and they would give in fake invoices. This was a huge impact which was seen in India, and recently during the demonetization, even if the government took a lot of steps, but because of this shell companies, the final impact, finally all the black money, dirty money became white money because of this shell companies. Next, in today's world, and this is what impacts our day-to-day lives, we see money laundering being carried out by all these prepaid cards, the e-cash, which is hard to trace, the proprietary systems, these are the tax havens. They have banks wherein there's not too much regulation, so there's not too much visibility on what is being done by those offshore banks. Then online banking. Maybe if you send $10,000, you have to give in your information, but if you throw in $9,999, there's not too much of rules wherein someone has to provide the information. This is where a lot of wrongdoings are done. Then virtual currency, Bitcoin, it's non-traceable to the owners. Then e-gold. Then all these pieces shows where our day-to-day lives are being impacted by money laundering. Finally, starting 2014 till date, there are a lot of regulations that has been brought in. There has been the Payment Card Industry Compliance Act, there's the Financial Crisis Hit us 2008, then the Dodd-Frank Act, which was brought about in 2010, so that the consumers could be protected from the abusive lending and mortgage practices by the banks. Then the flash crash in 2010 to Basel Act, the Market Access Rule, and then Consolidated Audit Trail Rule 2014. All these rules are in place, but still we are facing huge number of problems, and the impact in financial numbers is huge. This is because the money launderers are exploiting the system, which is very disorganized, there is huge diversity of data and difference in the process. So a lot of times, the regulatory compliance, people look at it as a big data problem, but actually it's a diversity and the distribution challenge, wherein the investigation techniques that we have today, a lot of money is spent only on identifying, normalizing, storing, moving, and optimizing the data into a central construct, and only little bit of time is given to the actual investigation. So we want to take off the anomaly from the process, and we want to give a streamlined approach. And also, to people who are a part of the investigation team, we want to give them the self-service BI platform advantages. So let's look at how we can leverage the BI and the power of a strong BI robust platform. So in an AML engine, there are 4 key areas from which data comes in, and there are 4 key areas that you want to track. First is our transactions. Next is the regulatory compliance areas. We want to track that. Next is we want to monitor our customers. Then we would want to have good reporting around the currency transactions. In the next slide, here is how we think a good BI and a strong BI and robust engine can help. On the left-hand side, we see our customer profile data. So along with all the data captured during the KYC, if we can build a platform wherein all the negative news is captured, all the peer analysis. So if a person has a Facebook profile, and then we see based out of New York, and then we see he has a lot of friends based out of Colombia, and then he has a lot of assets in Colombia, he shares those pictures. If we can bring in all the social behavior from LinkedIn, Facebook, what people are following you, that would be very intricate. So on the left-hand side, the customer profile data, we would want to bring in all the data from this disparate data sources. Next is the business as usual transaction data. All the transaction data would be captured. This two data, along with the different rules and regulations that the mandate compliance engines wants to take care of, we want to take care of this and build a mechanism where we can have right triggers. All these triggers would come in, they would hit the data, and then we would build an alert data set. Now, in today's world, even the money launderers and the criminals, they put a lot of work around. They invest a lot of money in technology as well. So what is seen today is 90 to 95% of the alerts are false positives. So these people, what they do is they invest 18 to 24 months in just looking like in doing innocuous activities. They look like they're regular customers, and then suddenly they do the transference. So this is where the alert data set and the regular transactional data comes in and sits in a database. And on the right-hand side, you'll see we have a summarized report. We have a customer-based report, which would be broken up into overview, the profile monitoring, and the transaction monitoring piece, and then the enterprise reports. So here in this engine, we want to give the self-service BI capabilities or the prowess to an analyst who is sitting on his desk. So in the next slide, and going ahead, we'll be bringing up a dashboard, which would show you how we plan to capture this.
Hey guys, this is Ankush here from UserReady. Thanks Anirvan for taking us through the introduction. So I'll just be taking you through a few dashboards that help us leverage anti-money laundering concepts to investigate and track malicious use or illicit use of cash transactions. To start off with, we're looking at an AML engine summary. As Anirvan just took us through the entire BI workflow, wherein you have 2 layers of data. One of the layer is where we have the alert data set, which comes directly from a basic AML engine. So that basically flags based on rules and weights all of the suspicious activities that for which we can raise suspicious activity reports. And for that, we show everything on the overall dashboard. As you can see, the volume of alerts over time, the total alerts, and of course, we want to break this down by customer alerts and also enterprise alerts, because their behavior would inherently be different. For each of them, how many suspicious activity reports have been filled, and what percentage of these are actually not suspicious or actually confirmed malicious activities. Going down, you can see that we have the number of alerts by different product types and for the different scenarios. For example, was it a high-risk geography associated with that? Was there an anomaly in behavior? And so on. And of course, we have false positives for every kind of scenario, so we know where we're going wrong or right. Of course, customer alerts and enterprise alerts are handled by their respective departments, wherein they are closely looked into. So let's look at a dashboard that dives closer into that. So as you can see here, we have a very similar looking overview. The only difference is this is only focusing on customer money laundering, and this is a summary page. The only addition to this that we have is, of course, the risk matrix. So while we are analyzing all the data that comes in into our anti-money laundering engine, we profile every single customer for their entire identity based on the documents, based on their activities, and also based on all the transactions they've carried out, and give a profile versus transaction risk score. The reason for this is because when you're looking at a customer's profile, customers basically, all the illicit activities are done occasionally, and for which you have to ensure that they do not have any criminal links. They've not unnecessarily delayed their KYC process and so on. And similarly, there might be some really good profiles that just have a very suspicious activities over time, such as this. So going into a deeper dive, right. So going into a deeper dive, as you can see, this is the customer profile view, the customer profile report. You still have the risk matrix. And here I want to see a person's profile, which seems very risky. He does not have a lot of transaction risk, but I just want to check out what is his basic details and also look at what is the non-compliance details because of which he has been introduced into the profile risk at a higher level. Of course, I can also hover over my the different risks, like is it a high, medium, low, and check out all of the highlighted objects on the risk matrix. This helps me investigate incidents beyond just what the anti-money laundering engine or the underlying alert database is providing. And going one step further, we can, of course, look at the customer transaction report. So the customer transaction report helps us see, again, the same risk matrix, but it helps us break down all of the details for that particular customer. For example, we see customer ID and all the other details. We see the kind of transaction types, the transaction breakup. We see their spendings over time, frequency and amount. And Tableau gives you the power to create some incredible charts, such as the Sankey chart, which helps you track from where to where is the money going over time, and what's the magnitude at a very quick look. So that brings us to the close of anti-money laundering. Let's just dive into what can we learn about credit fraud. So when you look at credit card fraud, as you can see, the last reported loss in 2015 was $21.84 billion. This is a 12% year-on-year increase in the loss from the previous year. And of this, 72% of the losses are borne by the card issuers. US ranks the third highest in these losses with 17.6 million incidents of identity fraud. And this number is set to reach 32 billion in 2019. So let's look at the different kinds of fraud that comes under credit card fraud. So you have bankruptcy fraud, application fraud, and theft fraud or counterfeit fraud. So let's just talk about bankruptcy fraud. It's basically when somebody applies for a credit card knowing that they will not pay it back and declare bankruptcy, wherein their credit score may go down, but the card issuer bears the entire cost. Similarly, in application fraud, through dubious means, the agent has received information across the board from a lot of people, and he, using fake aliases, has created multiple applications for multiple cards, wherein he uses the cards and throws it away. And lastly, the most common type is where cards are using skimming strategy, wherein there are machines that read your magnetic strips and the pin that you put in, or people steal your card, or they steal the data that has been stored in computers for credit card data. So these are the three kinds of main fraud that we see in credit card, and we look at how can we build a system that captures the solution effectively. So similar to what we did for anti-money laundering, we create a system in which we automatically flag all of the various dubious activities using this particular framework. So we basically have the incoming transactions, and the first thing we do is, of course, profile the user and understand does this person have any other malicious activities in the past. After that, we look at the transactions that have taken place and correlate that to historically fraud activities for that user and across the user base to see any similarities. Then we take it through any of the different machine learning techniques that will give us the best results, whether it be decision tree, neural network, genetic algorithmic clustering. And this is the final decision maker where we decide whether this is a normal activity or an anomaly. Now, it's very important to note that in anti-money laundering, there is a critical look-back period wherein for a few months, investigation can take place before a person is identified and alerted and the action is taken against him or her. But in terms of credit card, we cannot help, we cannot create, we cannot take action later on. We have to do it as soon as possible, for which this kind of infrastructure is very important, wherein we alert in the right manner, because in credit cards, people use the cards and throw it away in a matter of days. So going to a dashboard example of this. Right. So going to a dashboard example of this, we have a second, I don't think that was shared. So across the different credit card frauds, we see the alerts over time. As you can see that, we track the total alerts, the cards that were blocked so far, the total fraudulent transactions associated with these alerts, and also what are the confirmed losses to the financial institution. Of course, it's very important to understand where the vulnerability lies. That is to say, track which part of the world on a geospatial map can we say most of the frauds are taking place. Because the card might be swiped somewhere in Europe, but somewhere in the United States is where all these cards originally belonged. And there's a high vulnerability there. And of course, tracking the number of alerts by the different fraud types. Now, going into understanding the transaction over time, as we can see, we can again similarly create a risk score for credit card usage, which is plotted against time. And for each of these, as we can see, we have all the details associated to it, including a very detailed usage alert, basically that lets us know by time where it is being used and how it is being used. So if there are two swipe records next to each other on the same day within, say, 1 hour, that is something that you can definitely flag and investigate immediately and block the card. And similarly, in terms of application fraud and also bankruptcy fraud, you can, of course, look at similar customers using neural network and understand what are the other customers that showcase similar behavior, similar details, and flag them to ensure that there is no malicious usage of credit cards. That brings me to the end of credit card fraud. Anirban, can you please summarize everything?
So overall, by leveraging a strong BI platform, a strong and robust BI platform, end-to-end BI platform like Tableau, what we want to do is we want to bring consistency in process within an organization and across organizations. And we want to improve the productivity of investigation. In today's date, survey says the entire end-to-end, an analyst takes 45 minutes to investigate a crime, a money laundering or a criminal process, or fraud process. So within this 45 minutes, he or she spends 20 minutes in just getting the data together. Here, what we plan to do is we want to bring this data piece. We want to automate this data piece, and we want to make it 8 to 10 minutes only, and the rest 30 minutes, significant 30 minutes can be spent on the investigation piece. Overall, what we are doing here is we are bringing the analytics to data. we want to bring a strong regulatory fabric on top of all the data, wherein for each regulatory project, whether it be FACTA, Basel, Dodd-Frank, they are not looked upon as a single siloed unit. They all can exchange news data, and we get a 360-degree view of how our customers are doing and have profounding insights at each and every stage as we bring our customers together on board and continue relationships with our customers. So that was all from UserReady. Thank you, everyone.
Great, and let me thank everyone for participating and presenting today. I do want to open it up for some questions, though. There is the Q&A panel on your monitor, so if anybody does have questions, feel free to go ahead and submit them, and then we'll get those answered. So we'll give you all a minute, and we'll filter through questions. So this is a technical question, so I'll let Brent and Ankush to answer it jointly. The question was about how the alert database is created.
Anirban here. So what happens is, from all the data that is captured, so the rules engine, we write the rules based on all the regulations for each and every act that is brought about in the market. Say, for example, the Dodd-Frank Act, which protects consumers. I'm taking the example of this single act. In Dodd-Frank Act, it wants to protect consumers with rules like keeping borrowers from abusive lending and mortgage practices. So whenever an act comes into the market, what happens is a rule is built. For example, if this happens, we should flag this kind of customer for this much if the lending is more than this. So that is built on top of the data. And if it hits or triggers this rule, then it's flagged off. That is what we call the alerts engine. Ankush, would you want to add something?
Right. So in addition to the rules that we have, we also have the weight system. So as you notice, the profile and transaction risk score, we give different weightage for every kind of activity or part of the profile and transaction profiles. For example, if they delay their KYC process unduly, or if there is a requirement of a non-standard ID verification, wherein the normal verification is not enough, we give them a higher weightage. So, say from a score of 1 to 5, that is a 4, whereas an undue weight is probably around a 2 or a 3 out of 5. So, every single different part of the information that we receive about the customer for the profile and transaction, we give different weights, and this ultimately is sent to the alert database as a score between 0 to 1.
Great. Thanks, guys. We have several database questions in here. I'm going to start with let's start with a general question of Brent. Can you answer this one for us? Is there a template available of what the upload file to Tableau looks like?
No, so there is no rigid structure. So I guess there's an option with Tableau. So we've got this hybrid approach. That's one of the things that makes us unique. If Tableau has a connector to that data source, you can just connect directly to it. There's no requirement to extract that data and load it into the Tableau platform. Tableau can query that in a live fashion. Alternatively, if your back-end data source is like dog slow or it's not meant for analytics, so it lacks some analytic functions, you can replicate that data into a modern columnar database called a Tableau data extract, which is lightning fast. And there are no templates required to do that. There's a great video on tableau.com/learn that shows you how to create an extract, and you can get up and running with it in less than 1 minute probably. Okay, so if you have any questions beyond that, just ping Kim and maybe we can help you out there.
Yep. And then the follow-on question, Brent, is how often is a database updated and through which tool?
It doesn't really matter. Again, it's a hybrid approach. So if you've got a live connection to your data source, it's when you refresh the visualization through your browser, it will do a query, send that query back to the backend database and do it on the spot. Alternatively, if you've got an extract, you can refresh it at whatever frequency you want. It depends on the nature of your data. So if the data is not coming in that frequently, you could refresh it once a day, but it's simple to do, even in like 15-minute increments or even more frequently than that if you want to.
There's a question here that I'll ask the user-ready folks to answer. It says, which techniques are most efficient for fighting fraud while using BI? Not sure if that's an easy question to answer, if we should take that one offline.
We can give a quick glimpse of how it can be done. Getting us back to the presentation, maybe it gives a better understanding. So here, if you see, once the standard, the profile scoring, the sequence, and the division score is calculated, there's something we have brought in the statistical approaches. This can be done only when things has to be done right now. So here we have a decision tree, the neural network, the genetic algorithm, and clustering. This brings us the capabilities of predictive modeling into the picture. And based on use case, whether you want to take a decision or you want to throw it to the network and come up with an optimization engine, or you want to back it up with an algorithm, or you want to see how your specific scenario is doing with other scenarios in the world or in the scheme of things, you come up with clustering. So this is certain ways based on on the need basis, you pick up different statistical models. That's the kind of advanced analytical approaches we can bring in to the data side of things. I hope this was helpful, but again, as Kim mentioned, we can discuss and take it offline.
Yep, absolutely. And we do have some other questions here, so I want to be cognizant, though, of everyone's time. So we'll take a look at these questions and see if we just can't email back the folks we haven't had a chance to answer yet, since it is 3 minutes after the hour. So thank you all very much for joining. I hope you found it beneficial. Always open to some feedback on this, so please let us know as we continue our messaging to you on how we're able to actually drive some value within our industry. So with that, we'll close the call and hope to see most of you on the 2 next week. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. Good day.